Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're breaking down a massive, high-stakes row that could literally change the future of football's biggest competition. We are looking at a titanic clash between FIFA and UEFA. The battle lines are completely drawn, and the stakes? Well, they're fighting over the fundamental transformation of the World Cup itself, all fueled by billions of dollars in private investment.
Right out of the gate, we've got to ask the unthinkable. Could Europe actually boycott the World Cup? I know, it sounds wild, but following FIFA President Gianni Infantino's new financial proposals, European nations are reportedly holding emergency meetings this very week to discuss this exact possibility. The tension is incredibly palpable, and the governing bodies are clashing hard over what all this means for the sport.
To really grasp the emotional stakes here, you just have to look at the immediate reaction from major public figures. UK Prime Minister Andy Burnham recently posted a highly impassioned video on social media in response to these plans. He stated emphatically that the World Cup isn't a product, and the game belongs to the supporters who fill the stands week in and week out. He argued that dressing the deal up however you like just doesn't change the facts, saying once you have sold a piece of it, you have sold out. And honestly, that perfectly captures the anxiety rippling through the entire footballing community right now.
So, as disagreements boil over, with UEFA's president even skipping the World Cup final, we arrive at Section 1, the World Cup boycott threat.
UEFA is absolutely not holding back in its official communications. They released a fiery statement making their stance crystal clear, arguing that FIFA has crossed a line that football's governing institutions simply should never cross. They maintain that none of us are the owners of football, and therefore it's not FIFA's property to sell off to private entities. The real sticking point here is their phrase, the soul and governance of football are not assets to trade, highlighting a very deep concern over what they see as zero transparency regarding who actually stands to gain financially.
Which begs the question, what exactly is the deal causing all this uproar? Let's get into Section 2, selling football, the proposal. To understand the outrage, let's cut through the financial jargon for a second. The proposal centers around a brand new subsidiary entity called FIFA Forward Enterprise. Basically, the plan is to allow private investors to buy a minority stake in FIFA competitions, which crucially includes the World Cup. Now, the valuation numbers being thrown around for this new venture are absolutely staggering. We're looking at a total estimated valuation of around $20 billion, or roughly 15 billion pounds.
The sheer scale of this is just massive. 3 billion pounds. That's about $4.2 billion. That is the exact amount of capital FIFA is seeking to raise directly from these private investors. We're talking about a sudden influx of cash that would historically alter the financial landscape of international football in one single swoop.
So the really crucial thing is understanding the two vastly different ways this proposal is being viewed. On one side, you've got FIFA's pitch. They argue this raises vital billions that will directly and financially benefit football associations all around the globe. But on the flip side, you have UEFA's intense fear. They view this as a dangerous move that privatizes the sport, turning it into a tradable asset with zero transparency on who is actually pulling the strings and profiting behind the scenes. It's this classic high-stakes clash, proposed financial growth versus the preservation of sporting tradition.
But here's the thing. This explosive threat is actually the climax of months of smaller skirmishes. Let's look at Section 3, a history of brewing tensions. If you walk through the timeline, you start to see a really clear pattern of breakdown between the two bodies. First, when Somali referee Omar Artan was denied entry to the United States for the World Cup, UEFA immediately stepped in and selected him to officiate the Super Cup instead. Then, we had the red card suspension of USA forward Folarin Balogun during the tournament. After it was confirmed that US President Donald Trump had actually asked FIFA to review that decision, UEFA publicly accused FIFA of crossing a red line, calling the suspension completely incomprehensible and unjustifiable. And finally, UEFA actively decided to drop FIFA's controversial hydration breaks for the upcoming Euro 2028 tournament, stating they're only going to allow them when extreme weather actually poses a genuine risk. What's really fascinating here is how UEFA has taken this macro-level boardroom dispute and connected it directly to the everyday fan experience. Following a massive backlash over high ticket prices at the World Cup, UEFA deliberately contrasted itself against FIFA. They committed to way more affordable pricing for Euro 2028, setting their cheapest tickets at less than £30. Now, compare that to the World Cup, where the absolute cheapest group game tickets were set at £106. It's a very strategic move by UEFA to win the PR battle right there on the ground with the fans.
Now, to understand why FIFA thinks they can ultimately win this fight, we turn to Section 4, the billions at stake. It all comes down to the math, and it illustrates exactly why FIFA thinks they've got a winning pitch. Currently, football associations are in line to have access to $8 million up until 2030. But if these new private investment plans actually go through, FIFA says that access jumps to $20 million per association. That is a massive, tangible jump in funds available for grassroots football, vital infrastructure, and national teams. FIFA is very much relying on those numbers to win over support from associations who desperately need that kind of financial injection. However, as we all know, with massive sums of money comes intense scrutiny and, inevitably, rumors. There have been reports floating around claiming that the proposals would earn Gianni Infantino himself millions of pounds, even suggesting he might take a role leading the venture. Now, it is important to note here that FIFA has firmly and directly dismissed suggestions that Infantino could become the chief executive of the new entity when his final term as president ends. They've stated that such a move has never even been discussed. So who are the actual players orchestrating this deal? Let's zoom out. In Section 5, the political web unfolds. This is where the background details get incredibly fascinating. FIFA confirmed that the major banking firm J.P. Morgan is acting as a financial advisor on the project. Furthermore, reports indicate the investment itself will be led by Josh Kushner. For those of you following the political landscape, Josh is the brother of Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law. Having these specific figures involved naturally invites a whole new set of questions and scrutiny regarding the links between Infantino, global finance, and political figures like Donald Trump.
For UEFA, looking at this incredibly complex web of private equity and political connections, the alarm bells are just deafening. The strength of feeling is so high that UEFA actually compares this new strategy, specifically its perceived lack of transparency, to the infamous European Super League plans. You might remember those, right? The massive breakaway league plans that UEFA, along with fans, effectively crushed a few years ago? There is a very real, palpable fear in Europe that this current proposal is just another vehicle that's going to fundamentally transform football into something totally unrecognizable. Which brings us to the ultimate climax of this standoff, the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. Will FIFA's massive financial leverage, that tempting promise of $20 million payouts for global federations, be enough to win over the necessary support? Or will UEFA's nuclear option, the unprecedented threat of a European boycott of the World Cup, be enough to kill the deal entirely before it even gets off the ground? Ultimately, it all boils down to one final, deeply provocative question that every fan, player, and governing body is being forced to answer right now. Is the soul of football a public good that belongs to the fans in the stands? Or is it, at the end of the day, the world's most lucrative private asset just waiting to be sold? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep a close eye on those emergency meetings, because this story is far from over.